On today's episode of the Story Detective, I'm going to be continuing with my tips for April's Camp Nanowrimo. This time I have 6 tips, count them, for when you get stuck. Stuck is another word for writer's block, that elusive thing that postpones your writing indefinitely. And yet writer's block is a trick of the mind. If you have problems and you think, oh my God, I have writer's block, you think there's this barrier, an invisible barrier. You don't know quite what's causing it, and getting around it, you end up making it more difficult for yourself than it has to be, most of the time. You've run out of story material, or maybe if you're a pantser, the muse didn't show up that day. But there are some simple ways to re-engage quickly, and that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Hope you'll stick around. I've been a pantser, a planner, and a plantser, and they all have their difficulties. They're all some semblance of one another, and they all have certain things that work and certain things that may not work as well for some people. I say try everything, and a combination of the two usually works best for me. When I've planned, I've usually found that writer's block or getting stuck comes from the fact that there's something getting back to squares on my base storyline that I've neglected. Something that didn't extend beyond the corner of which I've written myself into. Pantsing, same thing. I've run into problems that I didn't foresee because the story is happening in a spontaneous way and suddenly you end up in that same corner. So rather than being cornered, let's look at ways to make the corner work for us or to turn around and get back out of it quickly. Grab a dictionary, open it up at random, and just start reading words and definitions down the columns. I guarantee that if you find an interesting word or a definition for even a common word that you didn't think about, it might be a little obscure. It gets the imagination turning again, in the same way that when you're reading fuels the imagination and sparks creativity, but it pulls you into a narrative of a story. Opening the dictionary and looking for words and definitions, you're not getting caught up in that narrative. It's a quick start. Same method, but a faster start to finding the word, finding definitions, and that generates ideas. And that, to me, has been one of the most helpful ways for getting out of that corner, moving forward again. And it's something that you can do once, twice, a dozen times a day, and it's still fresh because you're still coming up with words and you're still coming up with ideas. As if you have an ideas notebook, and most of us start writing down ideas for stories, even if we're not planners, we know that ideas are elusive and we start jotting things down. Sometimes we jot things down that we forget about, a couple of weeks or a month later, and we're drafting and we don't refer back to those notes because we have our story in here. Reading over your notes helps you not only reconnect with those ideas that maybe haven't found their way into your story yet, but it also helps you to regenerate that feeling you had when you wrote those notes and that energy that the idea had when it first came along. That's another great reason for keeping a notebook, because it's not just keeping track of your idea, the emotion and the feeling that those ideas generated. Sometimes we don't sustain that emotion on a bad day or getting through something as large as a novel, and it's good to reconnect with those ideas again, and that can also get you moving. If you are stuck in your writing wherever it is right now, think about the next paragraph in terms of writing an unexpected twist, something that the character didn't see coming. Make a list if you have to. I've found that making lists of things for the next thing that's unexpected, I've sometimes written 10, 15, 20 different things to get all the usual typical ideas out of the top of my head, because the first ideas that come along are usually ones that we're familiar with, things we see in a lot of movies and a lot of books, and it clutters up the space. So I'll sit down and make a list of what might happen next and I'll go through all those ideas, but the act of writing them down gets them out of the way. And even if I end up writing a dozen or 2 dozen ideas down before I get all the cliched stuff out of my head, it's worth it, because the next idea that I have to write down, I'll have to force myself to think about a little bit. But guaranteed, when you come up with that fresh idea, you get all of the nonsense out of the way. That fresh idea has really gotten me going again. Tip number 4 is like the first one we discussed with the dictionary, but take a novel that you've liked a lot, something that you found inspiring that you would usually reread again if you haven't already. Open it at random. Don't start at the beginning, because the beginning usually is building that momentum. But if you open it at random and start reading a scene, wherever it is, you'll usually get to the points of that scene where it's building up to its cliffhanger, its point, its conflict, and just by reading a few pages can sometimes be really helpful. So taking those story ideas of something that you find very inspirational, coming at it in a very random way, and remembering, oh yeah, I really enjoyed that scene, again, can trigger a lot of ideas. So that has also worked for me. If tip number 3 doesn't work for you in writing something very unexpected because that doesn't seem like it's going to fit within your story, think of something really absurd. The absurdity can get you moving, because it's something that we don't really think about and that we lack in novels. We don't think about things like embarrassment. Think about things happening to your character that are embarrassing. And if you can really think of something, whether it's something that happened to you or a friend that really embarrassed them, and have your character run into that, that's also a strong emotion. And if you can play that up, don't let it go right away. Think of how your character trying to make an impression or meet the ideal, the intent, whatever they went into the scene intending to achieve, not only has a twist, but what if they totally did something stupid and bungling and absurd or embarrassing? How would that affect the scene? And how might that help your story get moving again? Free association. Look at your manuscript. Go back to the last noun that you wrote, and then play that little association game where somebody mentions something, an object, a chair, a table, the sky, whatever the noun is. When you think of it, what's the first thing that comes into mind? Write it down. See if it gets you moving again. If that first noun doesn't free associate something that gets your imagination going after you've written a list of 10 or 12 things, then go to the previous noun and free associate with that. Free association is a great way to break up those mental blocks and to get yourself thinking again. It also helps you connect with whatever your character might be thinking. Try picking your character who's the point of view character for the scene. Take that noun in their head and free associate from their point of view. What would they think about if they said what comes into mind if you suggested this word? That can also be great, because getting into your character's mind, getting into their skin and thoughts, and having them free associate may help you come up with the next thing that they should or could do. Writing, structure, characterization, it's all based on psychology, so use psychological things that might be considered to be something that you would see in a movie in a psychiatrist's office, like free association, and let those ideas flow from your point of view, from your character's point of view, from the point of view of the character who your point of view character is in conflict with. There's a lot of different ways to come at it. And once you start getting into that wavelength of associating ideas with your characters, that's a great way to move forward. Bonus tip. If you're scrambling and none of this is working and you just can't seem to get beyond whatever the issue is, and this is something I have to remind myself of, when you keep pushing sometimes, the harder you push, the more resistance you cause for yourself. Sometimes you just need to be a little easier on yourself and leave it be for a while. Go take a walk, go wash the dishes, work on one of your other half a dozen creative projects for a day or so. Go watch a movie, something that's going to pull your conscious thinking in a different direction. Don't focus on it and the answer will come. Because the one thing about delays, and I think we can all testify to this, is delays can actually be quite beneficial. So in a way, these little blocks and delays can be like an awesome thing, because you go away and you come up with that one idea that you didn't think of before that's brilliant. And if not for those delays and making you have to stop and go do something else for a while, you probably never would have thought of that if you just keep pushing on. So don't fight it. Don't fight yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Just kind of go with it and take a little break if you have to. That's what I've got for you this time around. Hope you're all doing well. And until next time, keep those keyboards clacking.